You know, we all live our lives by rules and by deadlines. From getting a project done at work to filing your taxes, we are surrounded by these hard stops. But what if I told you that some of the most important deadlines are actually designed to be, well, a little bit flexible, and that the key to understanding this whole idea comes from a text that's nearly 2,000 years old? So let's dive in right where it starts, with one single, simple question.
It really does all begin with a puzzle. Imagine you're opening one of the most dense, complicated, legal and ethical books ever written, the Talmud. You'd think the first line would be some deep, profound statement about God or the meaning of existence, right? But nope. The very first thing it asks is a surprisingly simple, totally practical question. So our journey kicks off in the opening lines of the Mishnah, which is the core text of the Talmud. And the topic isn't some grand theological debate. It's about something much more down to earth. The timing of a daily prayer.
Specifically, it's asking about the evening recitation of the Shema. Now, this isn't just any prayer. It's considered this fundamental declaration of faith, a moment where a person accepts what's called the yoke of heaven. So you can see why getting the timing right would be a pretty big deal.
And there it is, the very first question of the entire Talmud. From when does one recite Shema in the evening? It seems straightforward enough. You'd expect a straightforward answer, right? Well, not so fast.
This is where things get really interesting. Because instead of one clear answer, the Mishnah immediately throws us into a debate among some of the greatest minds of that entire era.
The heart of the issue is figuring out what a specific phrase from the Torah actually means. When you lie down. What does that mean in practice? Well, as it turns out, 3 brilliant rabbis had 3 very different ideas about it.
And what's so fascinating is that each of these positions is completely logical. First, you've got Rabbi Eliezer. He says the deadline is the end of the first watch of the night, basically when most people are heading to bed. Makes sense. Then you have the sages, this collective group of scholars, and they set the deadline at midnight. It's a nice, clear, simple rule. But then, Rabban Gamaliel comes in and argues that when you lie down actually refers to the entire time people are sleeping. So for him, the real deadline isn't until dawn.
So you're left with this real dilemma, right? 3 respected authorities, 3 totally different deadlines. Do you follow the early, super safe deadline, the common practice, or the most lenient one? How in the world are we supposed to figure this out?
Well, the answer doesn't come from some complex legal argument. It comes from a story, a small, very human moment that, it turns out, reveals everything.
The text tells us this little story about Rabban Gamliel's own sons. They were out celebrating at a wedding feast, a huge social and religious event, and they just lost track of time. They end up getting home very, very late. And when they get home, they have a problem. They go to their father, who's not just their dad, but also one of the leading scholars of his generation, and they confess. With all the partying and celebrating, they completely forgot to recite the evening Shema. You can just feel the tension in that question. I mean, according to the sages, they've blown past the midnight deadline. Are they just out of luck? Have they failed in their duty for the day? Rabban Gamliel's answer is crystal clear. He tells them, if it's not dawn yet, you absolutely must recite it. He's practicing what he preaches. But in doing so, he seems to be completely contradicting what the other sages said. Or is he?
This is the moment. This is where the entire puzzle just clicks into place. Rabban Gamliel then explains to his sons and to all of us the real story behind that midnight deadline.
He reveals this stunning twist. The sages, he says, don't actually disagree with his position. They all agree the true biblical deadline is dawn. Their midnight rule? Well, that's not the final word on the law at all. It's there for a completely different reason. And this is the key to the whole thing. The sages weren't just setting one deadline. They were creating 2 different kinds. You've got the guideline, midnight, which is really a preventative measure. But then you have the actual law, the hard deadline from the Torah, which remains until dawn. The midnight rule isn't the law itself. It's a tool to help you fulfill the law. This is the crucial question, isn't it? If everybody secretly agrees the deadline is dawn, why on earth would you create a public rule that says midnight? What's the point of having a deadline that isn't the real deadline? The answer to that question reveals this profound and I think surprisingly modern psychological insight into how we humans actually deal with rules. It all boils down to this one simple principle: to distance a person from transgression. The sages, they knew human nature. If you tell someone, hey, you have until dawn, they might think, oh great, I've got plenty of time. And then they get distracted, maybe they fall asleep, and they miss the deadline completely.
That midnight rule, it acts as a buffer zone. It creates a little bit of urgency to stop us from procrastinating.
And Rabban Gamliel points out that this wasn't just a one-off thing. The same exact logic was used for other really important rituals back in the ancient temple. For instance, certain acts, like burning leftover parts of sacrifices or eating specific holy meals, technically had a deadline of dawn. But in every one of those cases, the sages publicly said the deadline was midnight, for the exact same reason, to build in a safety net against plain old human error.
Honestly, the best way to think about it is with this powerful metaphor. The sages built a fence around the law. The midnight rule isn't some electrified, impassable wall. It's more like a helpful guardrail on a dangerous road, designed to keep you from accidentally flying off the cliff. It's a rule that's meant to help you, not to punish you.
And that leaves us with a really fascinating thought to chew on. This ancient text teaches us that not all rules are what they seem on the surface. Some are hard lines, absolutely. But others are just guardrails. It kind of makes you wonder about the rules and deadlines in our own lives, doesn't it? Which ones are the hard walls, and which ones are just the helpful fences? And maybe the most important question is, how do we tell the difference?